senior population that represents?
So again, we did 55 and older, so that's the target market that we did. And it was about 4,000 that were sent out, a little over 4,000, so we're well over 25% return rate, which is great.
That's a great return.
It's a great rate, and again, I think it's going to be higher when they all get tabulated. We did extend the deadline for them to be returned, so if people haven't filled theirs out, please do and send it in. It'll still be tallied.
And again, if people have not received it or lost it, where can they obtain copies?
So they can contact Carol Julius over at the Library or the Council on Aging if they haven't received one, which they all should have received one. As far as dropping it off, they can either enter it into the computer directly, they can drop it off at one of the villages, they can drop it off at the COA, they can drop it off at Town Hall, they can drop it off at the library. There's plenty of areas where they can drop it off as well.
The information, if they want to access a website and do it online, is on the information that they'd pick up?
Correct.
Okay.
So again, that's going to be a great success for us. And, I think most importantly from the Board of Selectmen, you guys in Ambush help establish policy. And it'll be the best data source that you probably ever had to see what the will of the community is, and it can help us look for the future as to how we satisfy, needs of this population.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
something Mr. Malinowski said that's kind of surprising to me, that we would have people making comments out there that this is a waste of time. We've been going for years saying, we want to know what the seniors want and what they think what they feel they need. And, we've been basically stuck having maybe 15, 20 people that we get input from, and that's it. And the fact that we've, going ahead and reaching out to such a large population, and we're getting very good results. Usually you send out these surveys, and if you can get 10, 15% back, you're doing well. So I think this is money well spent. As Mr. Malinowski said, it's a grant, and I think it's going to do a lot of good for us.
Have those of us at the appropriate age in the board all done our
It's an
surveys?
anonymous survey.
Pardon me?
It's an anonymous survey.
I understand that. I just wanted to make sure that we all were aware of the opportunity and taking advantage of it.
We can't tell you if we're taking advantage of it. It's anonymous.
Well, what you say is anonymous. I don't think sharing whether you took it or not is. But anyway, moving on.
Update on annual appointments and boards. You want to jump on that, Elaine?
So, the reappointments, the annual reappointments are on the agenda for tonight. And we were working towards what you had talked about at the facilitators meeting of having a place where you can go online and see all of the names, the dates of the expiration of their term, and just have a rolling apply anytime during the year, knowing at the end of the year there'll be an opening. Whereas now I think we just do a listing on the website of what is actually currently open and accept those applications.
So, Elaine, by when end of the year, do you mean the end of the fiscal year or end of the calendar year?
Fiscal year, June 30th, all the appointments, all of the ones open to the public, and June 30th.
Okay, thank you.
Alan?
Yeah, just looking at the list you gave us in the package, like Ag Commission, it's all 3-year terms. Now, I'm assuming those people are not all ending at the same time.
Well, it depends. And again, doing this listing, you'll be able to see everything all together. When these committees are started, they're started all staggered. And then as people resign and people are reappointed, depending if someone doesn't fill their full term and they just resign midterm, it could end up that many people on a committee end at the same time.
Okay.
And some committees are still staggered. And when you do the appointment, you can look at the committee listing and say, you know what, maybe we'll just appoint them for a 2-year term.
Yeah, because I was going to say, it's interesting. The Ag Commission, Carver Cultural Council, and Community Preservation Committee are all the same, 3 or 2 or 3 years.
And we have tried to take initiative throughout the year to try to drum up more interest. We've put notices out on Facebook with a link to the page of openings.
I've seen that.
And we've done that a few times, and it doesn't seem to have made a difference in the activity.
Elaine, is there anyone that's applied for a position that's not on this list that is not being appointed?
No, I know you guys just got the new listing today of applicants.
I don't think there was any. I'm just wondering if there's
Don't
folks that
believe there
looked for
is.
one of these commissions or councils that,
No, we only have resignations. There's no applicants.
okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, on that point, if there are members of the audience or the community that want to apply, again, we encourage them to go online and apply or come to the office and apply. Again, if we don't have their application currently, then we don't have their application. We can't act on it. And, if somebody applied 3 years ago or whatever time frame, those appointments were completed, and then we start over again. So, again, if somebody's looking to apply or thinks they need to apply, they need to send in a document.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, just a question on the Old Colony Regional Vocational Technical High School District Committee. That's not a sole appointment by us, I believe.
Nope, Sean Clancy should be contacting the 3 members that were appointed at the last meeting to set up a meeting. So the school had put out the ad for the opening, and so they had that posted, which is pretty much posting for all of us. So there's no need for us to do a duplicate posting on that. The current member that is expiring does want to be reappointed, and there's no other applicants at this time.
Okay.
So they're waiting for that
Okay.
posting to end, and then they will,
But it still has to be approved by school committee, us. And-
so Sean will be setting up that meeting with
Okay, thank you.
those selected people. Yep.
Are we looking to vote on these tonight?
Yes.
So can we vote on the Old Colony appointment where we haven't had it?
No.
So we shouldn't be
I
voting
don't
on
think
that
so.
one?
That'd be excluded, I would think.
Are there any others that are in that type of situation where there's a group? Okay, that's the only one.
Does someone want to make a motion to approve the 2019 annual select board appointments?
I'll make a motion to approve the appointments except for the Old Colony Regional Vocational Technical High School appointment.
I, second.
Further discussion? Being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. All right, and did you have anything else, Mr. Malinowski?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm taking 3 minutes of my 15 up, so I'll stop there.
A select board update. We'll start with Mr. Belbin this evening.
So, are we doing the update, or are we going to selectmen notes?
These are selectmen's notes, and then we go into the rest of it afterwards.
Okay. Only thing that I really have is, the parade was awesome. It was good to show the people out there that went to it. And that's really it. I mean, I was waiting till the end, but it's okay.
Ms. Hewens?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sort of in the same boat. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who came to the Memorial Day Parade. It really was. And thanks for everyone who participated. It was a really good show of participation.
Mr. Dunham?
Outside of sounding like a broken record here, thanking everybody that came out to the parade and all those that came out to march in the parade. I think we had a good showing. It's nice to now see all our both our emergency services, police and fire, have a color guard. I think that's really super. And other than that, we're getting towards summer. Kids are going to be getting out of school. They're going to be going to beaches and whatnot and playgrounds. So it's time for people to start being a little more careful when they're driving around town, because there's going to be more kids on the side of the road.
Mr. Townsend?
Well, I want to recognize everyone that marched in the parade as well. And I also want to recognize and just congratulate the members of the Carver High School class of 2019, as well as the Old Colony class of 2019. There were 20 Carver graduates at Old Colony, and actually the valedictorian was from Carver, Amanda Hannon. So congratulations to all the graduates, and I think that's it.
I guess in addition to everyone's appreciation for the parade, and it's just a classic piece of Americana with a small town turning out to honor those that have made the sacrifice they have on behalf of our freedoms. I want to make sure we recognize Ron Delano, who for years has organized this parade. Ron is stepping down. I don't know, does anyone know what the plans are for next year?
No one knows because basically the Julian and Southworth Legion is, it's closing
Well, I
down.
realize that the American Legion's dissolving. I didn't know if, I thought I'd heard somewhere the Boy Scouts might be thinking of picking up the slack in organizing it. So I think we should just make sure that if whoever's going to be picking up the reins to it, please reach out to the town and the Board of Selectmen if there's anything we can do to assist to keep the tradition going. Bob?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I do have one other thing. I wanted to give you a little update on the Waste District. I went to my first meeting last week, and the district has to make some very serious discussions right now or decisions. Number one, can we afford to keep the district up and running? Number two is, are we going to make enough money, enough people want to actually use the transfer stations and keep it running? The $50 fee is not going to cut it anymore as of 2020. We only have, I think, 14 months or less than that for us to figure out what we're going to do. So the town did make a vote at the town meeting that they didn't want us to research a town-run system, that they like their private haulers. The problem is that if the district decides that they can't afford to keep the transfer stations open, then we have to make a decision on what we're going to do Carver individually in the future. So some discussions need to be made really quickly within our town ourselves. If something happens, the district, we don't know what's going to happen. We haven't taken a vote on anything. We don't know anything except for some baseline figures. But we know we can't afford to have 2 sites open, only one, if we do that. The price of a transfer sticker could go $200, $250, or even more per year. That's just to get rid of our trash, and even our recyclables, we gotta pay to get rid of all them too. So we have to make some serious decisions, but I think the town has to do our due diligence to protect our residents too, to have an alternative if something should happen, because if it takes another month or 2 for the district to figure out what we're going to do as a district, or if we're going to keep going, then that's less time for us to decide what we're going to do and how we're going to handle our trash. And for the people that don't have private haulers, all right, you're going to have to make a secondary decision to get a private hauler, because the town isn't going to do that unless we have a secondary town meeting vote that says, hey, yeah, we want to go for a townwide system like some of the other towns have. But
The existing contract runs to the end of 2020?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Is that correct, to the end of 2020? So we basically have between now and the end of 2020 to figure out what's happening. And I guess in the worst-case scenario, if we continue to not pursue a townwide option, everyone can anticipate that the cost of, they may not have an option to take their own trash somewhere, potentially, in the worst-case scenario. There may
Right.
not be any transfer stations, and the cost of hauling may at least double, possibly.
Well, it's going to double, because right now the town, for us district, it's $20 a ton to send out. Well, all the private haulers are paying the $20 too. All right, that price could go $70, $80, $90, $100. We don't know what that's going to happen to dispose of all that trash that we produce in our town. So there's some real money figures of, if you're paying $200, $250 now, that's more than likely going to double or even go higher. We don't know. That's the problem.
Haven't I heard a figure of almost $95 a
Yeah,
ton?
Bob, if I could just help with just a couple
Go
of
ahead.
numbers
Please do.
that I think are important. I think for the district to continue to operate a transfer facility, even with one transfer facility, I believe the numbers that were put out there were between $300 and $500 based upon the potential of the number of people that would use that. And again, that's assuming it would still be 3 towns operating that, because that means you have to pay for the labor, you have to pay for the insurance, you have to pay for all the accounting, you have to then pay for the benefits of the employees, you have to pay for the equipment, You have to get new infrastructure in some of these new packing systems. Then you have to transport it to a facility that's going to take it, and then you have to pay the tipping fee to dump it. Now, the tipping fee is the disposal cost, but again, you have all those other upfront costs that we're dealing with. So that's if we're continuing to run the facility. Case in point, Plymouth used to have 3 facilities. Then they couldn't afford 3, they went down to 2. People stopped using it and went to private haulers, they went to 1. And then that facility was no longer able to sustain itself, and then that was temporarily subsidized by the town. So people's trends over time have been to get away from going to the facility and to go to private hauler, and there's really no indication that that trend's going to change in the future. I think, so that's the transfer facility. And if the transfer facility is not open, then like Plymouth, people would have to choose to have a private hauler. Now, what I want to clarify too for the private hauler is that private haulers have to buy their trucks, they have to buy their insurance, they have to pay for the labor, they have to pay for the benefits, they have to pay for the training. They have all these operational costs. Then they have their tipping fee to dispose it. And right now, depending upon what company, you're paying somewhere between $20 and I think $35 a ton to dispose it. And that market rate right now is about $90 a ton. So again, that's a ton. That's not the big bulk of running the private haulers is these first costs, because it's labor, it's equipment, it's the time to go from different pieces. The disposal cost is not, half of their operation cost. So when the disposal cost does go up, it is going to raise their rates. I don't anticipate that private hauler rates will double, but private hauler rates will go up because they're going to have to pay more to dispose of it, but it's going to be a marginal cost over the year. And then you have to think about it, on an average, how many tons of trash do you throw away a year? If you're hypothetically throw away 1 ton, I'm going to use that as an example, then maybe you were paying $35 a year of your disposal costs, and now that goes to $90. Well, again, that's $55 that you have to add over your cost if the math worked out. So in essence, you're paying an extra $5 a month, more or less. That's the type of thing we're talking about with the hauler's cost going up. The bigger impact is operating the facility. But having said all that, is that doesn't take into account the recycling, which we've talked about at this board multiple times, is with the China sword, that money's no longer, that's not being taken by China anymore, which it used to be. So now you have to pay for recyclables the same as it costs to dispose it. So because you can't use that material anymore because of what's called single stream, it's contaminated, and therefore you're paying disposal costs for recyclables that are no longer commodities, with the exception of glass potentially and metals. So those are some of the changes that are going to happen. And really what's driving this beyond the recycling piece is the lack of landfill space available in the Commonwealth. Is landfills have been closing. Now, Carver has 3 landfills. 2 are closed, and 1 is in the process of closing. But the one that's in the process of closing in South Carver is where we, as the town of Carver and Wareham and Marion, were able to get these benefits, because by the landfill being open in Carver, we got, in essence, reduced rate of free garbage disposal for that. So again, that is, with the lack of landfills, it's causing this move to happen, because now stuff has to be shipped out of state versus being disposed of in state. And really the next market that's out there is trying to figure out where you can put some more landfills in the state of Massachusetts, because right now there's none in the permitting process, and that's really where the need is. And as a result of that not being there, disposal rates will continue to go up over time until the market changes a little bit. So those are the things that we're dealing with. And again, as we went to town meeting, we did ask town meeting for authorization to do a town-wide study to go under a single hauler. And I think town meeting was overly, clear in the fact that, even if there was some savings, as people want to have their own ability to choose, 1 of 5 or now 4 private haulers to move their garbage. So we're kind of, we have to live by that vote. But really, what the town of Carver is going to have to focus on, as Bob eloquently stated, is for those that don't currently have private haulers, they're going to have to make a decision. And that decision is either there's still going to be a transfer facility run, and then sticker rates are going to go up significantly, which would then be approximately close to the cost of a private hauler. So then why are you actually carrying your garbage to another town if you can hire a hauler to do it? And that's kind of what happened in Plymouth too. So that's kind of where we're faced. So, again, this doesn't really impact significantly the rest of the town that have private haulers. It's for those that don't have private haulers.
And I
except
guess-
that there are rates going up.
I guess I'm a little surprised to hear you say that if the cost of getting rid of the trash per ton goes from $20 to $95, that it has a minimal impact on our overall cost. But I guess what I need to know is how much tonnage does the individual waste hauler, garbage disposal guy
Excuse me, Mr.
actually
Chairman?
have? If
Kind of a point of order.
Yeah.
I think we're straying a little bit further than, because it was not part of the agenda. I agree. I think we need to add it to the agenda. I want to thank Bob for bringing it up, because it's, I'm sitting here listening to Bob and then Michael again, and it's like deja vu all over again. We have had that. David Robertson tried to warn us that it was coming down the pike, and now I'm glad to see that Bob has figured out, seen how serious it is, and it's adding an urgency to it, which I appreciate, but I don't think this is the time to be doing that.
Yeah, you're probably right. It's
agree.
an interesting topic. We probably should add it to the agenda to get into it a little more. I think it would be interesting if we could do the math, maybe
Yeah, we can put that per household. Just
ask
an
a couple of
average
haulers
that
maybe to
is.
work with us to say, if it turned out to go to 95, what would your rate have to go to, just to have a firmer figure? Because if they're doing, just doing some quick math, if they're doing 1,000 tons of garbage a year, then that's $95,000 versus, if they're paying $95 per ton, versus $20,000. So that's a $75,000 increase to their cost. Whereas if they're only doing 100 tons, then that's $2,000 versus $9,500. So maybe it's less of an impact. So I think it would probably, be good if you could work with, maybe the district even work with some of the haulers to give all three towns some sense of where private haulers are probably heading in the worst-case scenario.
So the district is working on numbers for ourselves, not necessarily the private haulers, but just for ourselves as a district. This needs to be, I think, put on the agenda for every agenda until 2020, because things are going to start coming up within the district because we have to make a decision. So if we could do that, put it on the agenda to have a update at every meeting.
Yeah, and then maybe...
At least once a month. 'cause
Skip over, yeah.
Right.
My meeting is at the end of the month, so the first meeting of each month, that be put on the agenda would probably be the best option. That way...
And if there's nothing to report, there's nothing to report, you just
Yeah.
move on.
There'll be things to report. This is the last thing that kind of goes along with this, is that the hazardous waste day, there was an issue, a number of different issues. It was a combination of 3 towns all going to the same hazardous waste day at the same location, that there were so many people in there. There was a major accident that was there. The police shut it down. It's not the district that shut it down. The police said no more. And there were people that didn't get to drop their hazardous stuff for the past couple of years. People have been holding it, and now some of them don't. And I have gotten email and talked to people in the donut shop, and calls and texts.
Welcome to the world of being a select
Which I don't mind. I'm all for it. I will answer the questions as much as I can, but I just want you guys to be aware. We know about it as a district. It is an issue, and it's going to be discussed at our next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Good for you to bring that to our attention, but I think it was worth the dialogue to just
no.
make sure, because the last thing we want to make sure that people see this coming.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If I could, just before we leave that topic, just put things in perspective, and I think this is good, is that, you all know how much your garbage weighs when you're bringing it to the street or to the thing, and let's just say it's 50 pounds a week that you're putting in there, you're doing. So that's 2,600 pounds a year. And again, a ton is 2,000 pounds. So, you're using 1.25 tons per year, just to put it in perspective. So, your disposal costs, and again, use this in comparison to what you're paying for your fee. If you're paying $35 per ton right now, and that goes to $90 per ton, and you're using 1.25 tons, I mean, that's kind of the increase that you would have as a regular residential piece that's in here. And again, I'm just using that as perspective, put this in here. I also had our department head meeting today, and interestingly, Bob, and I'm glad they're calling you, but so far, our health department, our permitting department, no one in town hall has received any complaints about the hazardous day. Again, I know it happened, but I just want to let you know is that, people may be reaching out to social media versus contacting the town hall complaining about things.
Has it not normally been 3 towns sharing the same site?
No, I don't know, Carver used to have our own day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was down at the Rochester Salt Shed.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Well, what I was told by our executive, that Carver didn't want to do one in our town. That's what I was told. And therefore, they have a better site in Wareham, that it's covered, it's enclosed in case of rain day or whatever. So that was a better spot, but Carver didn't
Trying to
want
put
one.
3 towns funnel it all into one spot, I mean,
I
that's
agree.
kind of just asking for trouble.
Yeah, just to add clarification to that, yes, Carver, we don't have an enclosed facility to put it in there. Wareham does have the facility. It was actually staggered, so Wareham residents would go between, I forget the time, 8 and 9:30, and then 9:30 to 11 was supposed to be Marion, and then 11 to 1:30, and again, I may have the times. So each town was supposed to have its own slot that was in there. So that it wasn't a free-for-all, so that you could balance that out. But certainly the accident, had an impact to it. And, from the town standpoint, is we actually also didn't have our O&M department's overtime account, because this would have been on a weekend, is in the negative right now. So that's why, it was a better design and better controlled system if people had followed the time slots and there wasn't an accident, but, things happen.
I'm sorry,
It was-
human nature. If my slot is one of the first ones and I overslept, I'm still gonna go. And I'm sure that happened an awful lot.
The other thing is that the mass quantities, that was another issue.
Yep.
Because it was a number of years, people held on to their oil and every other types of stuff. So the people that were actually doing the processing, and this is what I got, I didn't go, but this is what I got relayed to me through email, is that it was 2 to 3 times the amount that each car came in with. So that took more time to process, to get people in and out. The flow was working, it was just too much stuff coming in at one time, and the amount of cars that were there, and anywhere between 50 and 100 cars got turned away.
3 towns at the same time, multiplied by 3 times as much, doesn't seem like a
Right.
a great equation,
But
so,
it was a good learning experience.
as it was.
But it was free to the town of Carver.
Okay,
Now
moving
that
forward.
we've really gone into our time,
Okay, discuss the fence viewer update. I guess we got an opinion from town council?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. You received an email back, I believe it was May 24th, from town council regarding the question that was brought up at last meeting about appointment of fence viewers and what they can and can't do. So that appointment is subject to the Board of Selectmen. And, I would just suggest you have an individual who's interested in that, Bob, that, we should appoint you or somebody to be the fence viewer, for the board. We don't really get requests, but, I guess there has been one issue that's going on in town, and appointing somebody from the board to do it would be appropriate.
It appears that, just sort of reading between the lines, that at one time, the fence viewers had actually some jurisdiction, and now it seems like it's more of a mediating type of thing. They really can't say, here's your property line,
Right.
but they can try to work with people to try to, work it out. Did you have an interest in being a fence viewer, Bob?
Yes, and I think that the building inspector should be the other one, being a town employee too. I think that should be also recommended.
Yeah, I would actually try to keep the building inspector out of it, because he has to do other judicial type things, and since this is more of an opinion and a mediator type thing, We want a building inspector to be black and white based upon state code. And building inspectors are actually trained and not to take measurements on property where things are at because they're not licensed surveyors. So a building inspector won't actually take a measurement to see where a property line is because they don't want to be liable for that. As I think is mentioned in here, is only surveyors can justify where a property line is. So I would actually encourage not to have the building inspector be the fence viewer. I would keep it as a non-technical employee of the town that has judiciary review.
Was there anyone else on the board that was interested?
Well, I just want to respond.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not a surveyor either. I mean, mediator is fine, I have no problem with that. How about you be the second one, Mike?
Again, it's a mediator piece, and no one, as it says in here, we're not surveyors, you're not doing the survey piece that's in here. You know, that surveying is not part of it. It's there.
But it does say we shall annually appoint 2 or more fence viewers. No one's talking, I don't think anyone's talking about them being surveyors. Yeah.
Well, no, as Bob says, he's not a surveyor.
Well, why don't we put it out there and see if someone else is interested in the
Is
community?
there no other interest from the board? Okay.
So you have one?
Pardon me? We have one, and let's advertise for a second fence viewer,
Yeah.
or more.
we need a
Doesn't have to be
motion
just
to
one,
appoint?
doesn't it, you know, it's 2 or more.
Right. So I'll make a motion that we appoint Bob Belvin,
Second.
Selectman Belvin, as a fence viewer.
And,
Motion made and seconded, discussion?
yeah, and I was thinking that maybe when we advertise for another one, they could be privy to this email that describes what they can and can't do.
Well, I would think we would go ahead and, everybody that applies, we could send them a copy of the email. I mean, that's
Well,
not privileged.
Might be good for them to see it. I think Sarah's point is that if they see it, they'll understand what,
Right.
perhaps. Actually, there should probably be an explanation, too, because just reading that
Yeah.
might almost scare them a little bit.
I know.
You
Yeah.
almost need a,
But the point is that they need to know, you know, why should they be interested in being a fence viewer?
Right.
Oh, well, here's the job.
Right.
you almost need a 1 or 2 sentence, simplification
Yeah,
to
it's-
go with it. Yeah.
Term of 1 year, sir?
Yeah, term of 1 year.
Okay. And then I think, to Sarah's point, let's include just a little summary and put, that when we post it out there as the positions being open on the town website, it can have the little summary of what it is, and then this, the attorney's opinion. All right, motion made for a 1-year appointment of Bob Belbin as fence viewer. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Okay, we move on to, well, we've actually already done the rest of the annual reappointments. We do have the appointment, we get a letter from the South Shore Community Action Committee requesting Sarah Hewins be reappointed to the committee. Sarah, are you willing to be reappointed?
Oh, yes, you guys just reappointed
we
me.
already
We
did.
did it.
Oh, was that part of what was in there?
I'm on the
Okay.
list.
My
Yeah, I
bad.
didn't realize I think they didn't realize the list was going to be up there.
Okay. All right, we come to discuss fee increases proposed by treasurer collector, town clerk, O&M director, and planning director relating to municipal lien certificates, birth, death, and marriage certificates, cemetery lot and cremation wall for residents and non-residents, solar panels and energy storage fees to be voted on 6/18. So this is a discussion, and then a vote will come at the next meeting?
Yes, and why we did that is that not all of these are subject to the article that town meeting approved to appoint new fees, with the exception of the treasurer collector. And with that, it said in there, you have to notify the public, the town clerks 14 days in advance. So that's why we pushed the vote off there, and we have downstairs a list of the proposed new fees at the town clerk's office, should anyone take a look at that. But I think right now, Kathy, I know we've talked about this, this fee for the treasurer collector ad nauseum, because, you know, we're losing money, and this comes with the transfer of property. So I don't know if you want to hear from Kathy again on that, or...
I think it's worthwhile, as long as she's
Always.
taken the time to sit here.
Look at mine, Alan.
I see it.
I just mentioned you all should have that as a separate attachment on your laptops if you want to view the listed detail. And that detailed list is posted at the town clerk's office and on our website.
Okay, so it's already out there.
It was posted today.
Thank you.
All right?
Hi.
Please introduce yourself and give us and then proceed.
Yes, I'm Kathy Kay, the treasurer-collector, and from the collector's office, we're just requesting an increase of fee for our municipal lien certificate. Currently, it's $25, and all the surrounding towns, practically most of them in the state, charge a $50 fee. We actually had a lawyer call today who sent in a $50 check, and we had to call them and say, sorry, it's only a $25 fee, and they told us, why don't you raise your fees? So
Don't
So
hear
they
that a
want to
lot.
pay more.
they want to pay us more. So the municipal lien certificate is a legal document that is requested at the time of a sale of a property, the transfer of ownership, or at a refinance, and it's just to certify all the taxes that are due and outstanding for a parcel, so that at the time of the refinance or closing, it can be determined who owes what for taxes. And this deed, this lien certificate does get scrutinized to make sure it's accurate to the best of our knowledge, and then it gets recorded at the Registry of Deeds as a legal document and statement of what is due. And again, so usually it's the lawyers that are paying the fee as part of the sale process, and it is a one-time fee.
All right, just for the purpose, of someone want to make a motion to approve?
You're going to wait till next week.
Oh, that's right, we're just listening today. Thank you. All right,
Any other questions?
Yeah, I noticed this doesn't include the fire department fees, correct?
No, I'm just here for the
Treasurer
municipal lien certificate fee request, which is just that.
Was any thought given of increasing the fees even a little bit more? Because they're not really going up all that much.
you talking about municipal lien certificate?
No, all the fees.
I'll get into those in a second.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I can't answer that.
She's just doing it right.
Any questions for Kathy on the municipal lien certificate?
Yes, please. So with a lot of towns that have water bills and gas bills and all these other things that the towns run for it, what is included in that lien certificate for liens that the town puts on? It's just basically taxes, right?
No, well, it's, so if a property is past due in taxes, and if it's in a tax title status where we filed an instrument of taking with the Registry of Deeds, and that information needs to be on the municipal lien certificate too. It does not include personal property taxes. If it property does have a water bill through the North Carver Water District, we would add that because that is an outstanding committed bill on the property as well. But that would be it.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
And Mr. Malinowski's going to take the rest of our
Yep, I'll
questions?
take the rest of them.
Okay.
And I'm going to start, let's see, with the town clerk. Our new town clerk has requesting that we increase the birth, death, and marriage certificate from $5 to $10. As she points out, it's $50 in Boston, but it costs them more than $5 to process these. And many of the surrounding towns have at least $10, so that's what she's recommending for that. You know, as I'm talking about that, is that when we asked the different departments, including fire and police and other departments, what other fees and everything that they saw that were problematic, what we asked them to do was you kind of poll the surrounding towns. And clearly the direction from the Board of Selectmen has been, you don't want to be at the bottom third and you don't want to be at the top third. You want to be kind of in the middle, maybe slightly higher than the middle, just to, so we don't have to do this every year. So that was the consistent direction that they were given when they did look at all their fees as they go around with that. So again, that's the only change from the town clerk, is to move it from $5 to $10. And surprisingly is that our funeral home in town has always paid $10, even though they're required to pay $5. Long story, but she did contact the funeral home and told them that, and they said, nope, not a problem, this has been paying you already, because that's what they pay in other towns. And it's just easier for them to pay everybody the same. So to the next is the operation and maintenance department, and this is the big change from their department, which is they've added the cremation wall, which again is something new. So they have rates on that because we had to build the structure that's there. It's going to be installed, and you'll be able to buy slots on there. And then also to raise the rates for resident and non-residential rates by $100 each. Now, keep in mind, this fee goes into a perpetual fund. That perpetual fund is the endowment, if you will, from that fund actually pays for the upkeep of the facility. And this includes them going through, meeting with the family, finding a plot, digging the plot, making sure it's prepared for the burial, and then also then backfilling the plot when it's done. And then also in the winter, sometimes that can be problematic, but it's part of what the fee structure is. And John Woods felt that current lots were not in conformance with the surrounding towns and what our costs are. And then again, the new cremation wall is something that's new that's added to this with the rates that are proposed on that.
On that, Mr. Malinowski, where that's something new for the cemeteries, and so it's a structure going in the cemeteries, was that something that has to go to town meeting for approval?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No.
And
This
this
is
is
a
only,
wall, yeah.
this is only going to be at the center?
Only at the center.
Okay.
Yep. That's something we've been talking about and been in the plans for about 2 years. Yes, Bob?
So, with this, believe it or not, I just read an article on, pretty morbid, but I'm in the healthcare field, so I read really morbid things sometimes. But I thought this was very interesting that in Washington State, they've started to compost human remains. And it's pretty affordable to do that. And if we could be the first ones in the state to look at that with our cemetery district to see about this, it's just another thing to bring into our town, something new, something different that allows an option for people, and you get to help the world as a whole.
What's the mulch used for?
It could be used for anything.
By anybody?
Wait a minute.
Yes.
I'm confused then. I thought you were talking about the green burial where they're just sort of wrapped in a shroud and allowed to become part of the
No,
earth.
this is actually where they actually
Turn
decompose.
humans into mulch?
It turns
Yes.
into a usable
That I
product.
was not familiar with.
Into a usable product that you can use for compost.
I just have a,
That would be repurposing me.
It really, to be totally honest, I says, I'm really interested in it, to the extent of the cost for burial nowadays, with getting so high, and crematoriums and whatnot, but this is a totally different option, and
so on,
and it
area could
works.
go ahead and be part of your flower bed?
Yes.
Okay.
The town could use it as compost. You could use it for the cemetery to keep it maintained and whatnot.
What's weird is I did read that article.
Yeah, so I mean, it's an option, just put it out there to people,
So I'll ask Dave Siegentoff to take a look at that.
yeah.
Interesting.
Are you volunteering, Ron?
No, but I'm sure my wife will. No, volunteer me.
Okay, moving on to the rest of the rates. There's some modest increases for plumbing, gas, electrical, building that are all through there. And again, you can see those, and I think as Alan mentioned, they're modest rates, and this is comparing the town, what our cost is to do business. And again, this is a fee-based structure that we operate on. The big change that you have in here, and it's a big change from the standpoint, it's redoing how we focus on solar and energy storage. Probably about 6 years ago, 5 years ago, it was 5 years ago actually, we put in a per panel rate for solar panels going in. I think they were $2 or $6 a panel when that was done. And with that was the best way that we could really look at how to describe a permit fee for solar that was happening. Since then, panels have become more efficient, and you're getting more panels or less panels on the same piece of parcel, so the board changed that rate a few years ago. But in hindsight, looking at this, what we're actually proposing is that it's an easier and more straightforward math, is that for all solar and energy storage units, it's $10 per kilowatt DC. And what that actually means is whatever the system's designed for, it's a straight mathematical example as to what your cost would be for that permit, which actually works well for the town, particularly for some of the larger projects. In doing this, it also slightly reduces some of the charges we had to some residential property. So if you figure a typical residential property was about 8 kilowatts that's in there. Sometimes there might be 9, but 8 to 9 kilowatts. That the old system had a connect fee of $55 and then a $25 minimum fee, and then it was per panel cost. So it was, costing you a little over $100. Now, if you go and get an 8 or 9 kilowatt system, it's going to be $80 or $90. So this rate actually lowers a little bit for residential, but allows us to better calculate that for the big projects. And that's kind of where we are focused on the big projects. So that's the other change that you see in here beyond some of the nominal stuff that's go through each one of these permits. And those are the changes we have this year for permits. And like I said, this is posted downstairs at the clerk's office. So if anyone has any questions, they can take a look at it. That's that.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I wanted to make sure, and I think this was mentioned earlier, but I wanted to make sure for the public, because I know in some instances this will be seen as, kind of a hidden tax. And I'd like to make sure that we really have done our due diligence to check rates in other towns. And maybe we could have a chart put up right next to the rates so people can see, okay, this is what they're charging in all 10 towns around us, so okay. I just, I think that kind of information is very valuable, people.
I will ask the building commissioner who has that data to post that downstairs next to the clerk's office,
Thank you.
whatever they have already assembled.
Bob?
With the fees, it was my intention that fees are for the actual work that has to be done by the employees. Has these fees been calculated in the actual cost of how much it costs to actually do the service that's being provided? Because if it costs more to process a birth certificate than it does for a marriage certificate, then maybe tiered costs for each one should be done that way instead of just a flat rate cost. It's all about how much it's taking away from doing their other business in the town.
Well, I think you heard just from Kathy and others for years, the town was not charging the appropriate amount to cover the cost. So I'm not going to sit here and profess and say that each one of these fees is actually going to cover the full, complete cost, included the embedded cost, which includes the benefits, the health care, the operations of the building for that office that's down there, because we haven't taken it to that extreme yet. What we're trying to do is make progress from where we were before, so we're slowly coming up and doing it in a responsible way that we're not overburdening the ratepayer when they come forward for these new fees. And again, all of these are predominantly tied into new construction or major rehab or major new projects that would happen.
Okay,
Does that help answer your question?
that's fine. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
That's my intent.
Okay, let's move on. I guess the last thing is the allocation policy from one-time solar and battery storage projects to conform with the town financial policy.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pass around, pass that around, please. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
So as I have been talking for a while, is that the town is in the process of permitting and approving several solar projects that will be forthcoming in the community. I've also mentioned on several occasions that these agreements that we put together, these tax agreements, are for personal property. Personal property, by definition, is something that's depreciated, which compared to residential real estate is the landowner will continue to pay taxes every year and generally go up 2.8% per year. On the flip side, personal property goes down generally over a 7-year cycle as it's depreciated down to zero. With that, the solar projects fall under the depreciation or personal property component. And with that, would not be considered reoccurring revenue, even though we have an agreement. That agreement does have a termination date. So on page 2 of this document, under section F, is kind of what I'm discussing right here. And 3F is for ongoing operating costs shall be funded by ongoing operating revenue sources. This protects the town from fluctuating services and avoids concerns when one-time revenues are reduced or removed. So going down to section F, and I want to address this in 2 parts. So the first sentence is tax agreements for personal property, example solar farms, depreciate over time, are considered one-time sources of funding as they are not reoccurring given they have defined termination dates because they end. And when they end, that money no longer occurs anymore. Now, we've been fortunate that originally when we started doing these projects, we would put a 2.5% inflator in there every year, and that would increase 2.5%. Now what we have to do is do a fixed number, so we still include the 2.5%, but it's fixed over the time period, but it's a steady payment over the length of the solar projects. But when they end, they're in the tax levy. That tax levy then no longer receives a revenue payment. When it no longer receives a revenue payment, the residential base has to pick up that delta that's in there. And they have to pay for that delta as an additional tax, if you will, or their share of the tax levy.
You're saying if we put it towards an operating budget item?
Correct. And therefore, it'd be 2.8% plus their share of this in the future when that happens. So what is being proposed here is that because of the definition of what it is, and I have talked to the school department about this as well as our financial team, is setting aside that personal property tax agreements outside the operational revenue piece. And the second part of that section in there is funding from these tax agreements will be allocated equally into 3 categories. So we're proposing 3 categories. Again, this is consistent with our financial policies. And I do want to emphasize the financial policy is just that. It's the policy of the board. The board can change policies in the future if it feels it needs to modify these in 5 years or 3 years or 30 years. But it allows financial forecasting to go through and allows our bond rating to remain, on a positive state. So again, they'll be allocated in 3 equal categories. The first would be for unfunded liabilities, pension and OPEB. Once our pension and OPEB liabilities are funded, then that means we have to send less of our operating money to fund those. That means that operational budget money can be used for other operating purposes beyond funding these unfunded liabilities from OPEB and pension. The second would be to set up a sinking capital stabilization fund for the new middle high school. Right now, all of our other properties are bonded. We can't prepay the bonds at this point. They're fixed for the amount that they are. Sometimes there is a period where you can prepay them at the end of the period, but for right now, they're all fixed. And we do know in 20-plus years, after our MSBA grant is done from the standpoint of the work we did on the middle high school, is that we're going to have to do a major renovation for that facility. And whether or not it's a major renovation or whether it's a rebuilding of that, there's going to be some big expense that's coming down the road. And it's not going to be a $48 million project like the elementary school. Middle high schools are double to triple what it takes to do an elementary school. So it's a big number coming in the future. This would give an opportunity of taking, in essence, one-time money and plugging it into a fund to help offset that cost down the road. But the third piece is the one that I think is more interesting, is that taking a third of these funds to offset the operational revenue that goes for dollar, that goes into the capital and debt stabilization fund to fund the capital and debt stabilization fund, including the debt service that's in there and other annual cash expenditures that we put in there. By using this money, that means that the real operational money could be left in the operational budget to be used by the town and the school, rather than being pulled into the debt and capital fund to fund the debt service that we have to do. Which gets to the objective that the Board of Selectmen and the school committee and you guys have been taking a look at, as to how do we keep a little bit more money into the operational base, and this is the responsible way of doing it over time.
So just as an example of that then, let's say a third of it represents 100,000. So that we would take that 100,000 that was coming in, put that into debt. Then the monies that are in the town that were going to pay off the debt are now freed up to go into the operating budget at
Correct.
that point in time for the 70-30 split between the schools and the town.
Correct.
But isn't that the way it's been
What, with what we've done so far?
with the,
The solar?
yeah.
Well,
with
right, we
personal
haven't had a
property.
policy. We've done it differently. We took the first, I think there was $100,000 that we dedicated to offset the bond for the elementary school in order to lower the debt exclusion.
Yes, I know.
for-
And that was done 100% in there.
That was done at 100%.
Yeah.
But no, what this policy is trying to do is to set a policy on what we do, because there may be more of these coming. And instead of just taking them piecemeal as they come.
But my question, or my point, I guess, is that I was under the impression that that's what we're currently doing. That personal property tax is not going into the budgets, the operating budgets, going into these funds that are listed here.
No, but it wasn't necessarily helping to relieve the operating budget either. This would help to
Well,
relieve the operating
if
budget.
we're doing what if what's being proposed is what we're doing now, how does that relieve the operating budget?
So Sarah, this is not what we were doing before, is any of the personal property, remember, was set aside, and that was to go into the capital and debt stabilization fund. The point that I'm trying to make tonight is that, in essence, what you're doing is building in a future tax increase by not doing what's presented here for the average taxpayer. And that's what we're trying to avoid, is to say, okay, if this is depreciated and it goes away, then you're going to have a 3%, 4%, 5% tax increase those years to make up for this. And for all these years that we did put all of the personal property into the capital and debt stabilization fund, this then now is a more responsible way for doing that into the future, that is going to, in essence, release some money back into the operational budget.
I guess my point is that, and I certainly understood all that. My point is, that I don't understand how you're proposing that this is different from what's already being done. I don't see it.
Right, because when we did the $100,000, which was the big piece that we have, is that was 100% put into the debt service. And in essence, when that ends, then you can, in essence, do an underride to get rid of that $100,000 in the base without impacting the operational budget. That's what we're trying to avoid, is getting to a point where we are forced to do layoffs or some other major issue by building it into the operational budget. So this is designed not to build it into the operational budget, these new funds that will be coming over the next few years, but to put them into this process.
I
Mr.
understand that,
Chairman.
but
It hasn't been part of our policy. It hasn't been an official part
well,
of
my
the
point is
policy.
that my understanding was that what we were doing with that personal property tax to begin with was putting it in the capital and debt stabilization fund.
Correct. Now I'm trying to get this is taking some money. This is relieving other funds that would normally fund the capital and debt stabilization fund, and putting these funds into there, which then means those funds can stay in the operational budget, and as the chairman said, can then be used operational based versus being put into the capital. So there's a bigger benefit for more operational funds by doing it this way.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, maybe if
Well,
I can...
Bob, you want to say something?
I'll let him talk it out.
Thank you, Bob. Couple things. First up, that 100,000, if I remember right, was actually the result of 3 projects,
Yes,
and we have not really had any more projects added since that time, correct?
correct.
Okay, so the personal
Two
property,
small ones, two
yeah,
small ones.
but the personal property that's going to fund our capital would never be able to pay up all the money we're expending under capital. We take a certain amount of our tax revenue and stick it into capital, so you've got personal property plus whatever extra we had to take out of our tax base to put in there to get enough money into the stabilization account. By putting this money in for all these new projects that are coming down the line, which there may be considerable income from, it allows us to, instead of taking that money out of what could be used for operations to go into capital, we can now leave it available for operations, so we can increase how much money we can give to the schools and increase our own town operating budget. Do I have it pretty much like that?
Yeah. Okay, you guys are assuming that I don't understand what you said. I totally understood. I hear your words, I get your argument. My understanding is that that's what we were doing anyway,
No.
because we put 100% of that money into the capital debt stabilization fund.
Right, but this isn't doing that anymore.
Okay.
This is setting it up this way. And the purpose of this is for those three categories, is that when we get this so-called one-time money, it goes into three buckets. One of those buckets has the residual effect of dollar for dollar creating more money into the operational budget, which currently doesn't exist today.
And this is going to go ahead, and it's for coming out of new solar projects. It's a different, it's sort of like we're separating out solar projects and that personal property from what's regular personal property tax.
Right.
Would that be a fair
That's correct.
assumption? Okay.
And just to give you some comparison, I mean, at the next meeting, I'm going to be bringing a small solar project that's going to produce $11,709 per year. So if you look at that one, again, it's a small piece, so in that one, I do expect larger projects, but you take that $11,000 and you break it up into three buckets, and that's how that would go. And again, this is to set up the process for when some of these other projects come online that, will lead up to $100,000 or more over time.
Bob?
So what Sarah here is saying is that we had a policy here that it was supposed to be separated into three, but we weren't doing that.
No, this is, the dividing the three is sort of new.
Right, oh, this is.
F is
when was-
brand new.
So we're adding this to the policy, this is a new policy?
New policy.
Recommended as a new
F is a
policy.
brand new section. We ended at E, and now I'm proposing we add F.
Okay, because I read the financial policies and it has the dates that it
Oh,
was
yeah.
approved here.
Yeah.
That's what I looked at saying that, did we approve this at town meeting?
No,
So this is a new
a
part.
brand new paragraph, F, that I'm proposing gets added to your last update that you did across the street a month ago.
So that makes more sense, thank you. All right, so I agree with this process here, it looks good. The question I do have is, these pilot programs that we're doing for solar, they last 20, 25 years. After those 25 years, they don't have to pay taxes anymore, or do they still pay the property tax, the personal property tax for the solar panels?
So the way that the tax agreements work, 20, 25 years, the future ones will all be 20, based upon, we're leaving, we're going into the SMART programs, so there'll be 20-year periods from the SREC programs, it's the detail. At the end of those 20 years, then they no longer have an agreement. And we don't know what's going to happen in 20 or 25 years. Right now, they all have a decommissioning bond that's done through the planning board that they have to remove them in 20 years. So when they remove them in 20 years, there's nothing there. And even if there was something there, it would still have a zero value because it's been depreciated and it has no value. Even if something was there as a structure, it doesn't have value as personal property unless they upgrade it. But we don't know if they're going to upgrade it or not. We don't know what the new technology is.
If they did upgrade, then we'd have to go to a new
Then
agreement.
we have to do a new agreement at that point, but we don't know that either. We don't know what the new technology is going to be or anything like that. And Bob, that's the problem with personal property, which is convoluted in our tax system, is that real estate always goes up over time. Personal property has a 7-year and it's done. And sometimes it can be an accelerated depreciation. And the town will get that money in that first year, and that then gets added to the tax base. When that payment's gone, the delta between here, the residents pick up. The next year, when the delta gets more, they pick that up. When it stops getting paid, the residents have to pick that up, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. Now, I could easily come here and say, none of us are gonna be here in 20 years, so who cares? But that's not how this town has been operating for the last 5 years with our financial policies. That this is what we need to look at so that you don't get hit with a 4, 5, 6% tax increase when these things go away, that you have the ability of doing the underride and not, and without laying off people.
So in essence, what we're doing is building in some long-term protection for the taxpayers 20 years down the line. And in addition, we're be able to put some additional money into the operating budgets, correct?
Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it?
Sounds like
That's what we're trying to do.
Because this kind of, to me, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, through you, it kind of answers that question that I know I get quite often. What are we going to do when we have to build a new school? Because we know we're going to have to build it. And for once, the town is being proactive and setting up account to help offset some of that. I get asked, what about this OPEB liability thing? How are we going to pay that off? Again, by taking a third of this, that's why I think it's a real good plan, because we are taking active steps to reduce that OPEB budget. So I just think,
And I would just provide a little caution that we don't know what these projects are. We may get some windfalls out of this. It may not amount to a lot, but at least we'd have a policy in place so that as they came, we know what the intent was. And I think the other important thing for me is that depending on if we found ourselves in some sort of dire financial circumstance, this is a policy that we always can break from if it's necessary to do so.
That's right, nothing's written in stone.
But
Just like you modified it 7 or 8 times, it can still happen again, but again, this gives us a document we work off of.
does this also take into account battery storage facilities?
Yes, it does,
Okay.
because that would still fall under a tax agreement. Those are still several years away, even though it's been permanent, the technology.
yeah, I think the key phraseology is right at the start where it says tax agreements, so it's really contemplating things that maybe we're not even thinking of now that might come down the road. What's the pleasure of the board?
We need a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I go ahead and I move that we adopt Section F
I second
as
it.
far as the financial policies.
Made and seconded, discussion? Being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, let's go to minutes, license topics not reasonably anticipated by the chairman 48 hours in advance of the meeting. Were there any such items tonight? Nope, okay. We'll go to the minutes of May 21st. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move we approve the minutes of May 21st, 2019.
Second.
Further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. A one-day special license, St. John the Baptist Club for June 22nd from 6 to 11 p.m. Also on June 23rd and June 24th from noon to 11. Pleasure of the board?
I move we approve the special one-day license.
Second.
Further
Yeah,
discussion?
ask him about it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
do we author, when we do this license agreement for beer and wine, that they prove that they have an insurance policy to cover while they're running the projects at all?
Yes?
The license holder has to have the insurance, yes.
Okay, want to make sure.
Yeah.
I know from the Sportsman Club, we use a private company to come in, and I know from when we run it ourselves, that we have our own insurance policy to cover it. So I just wanted to make sure that other facilities have the same thing. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Being none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Anything we need to know about the change of corporate name for Mamma Mia's?
Mr. Chairman, point of order before we do. I'm showing on our agenda Plymouth County Advisory Board annual appointment. Did we actually do that already, or?
Oh, I missed
I
that.
think we
Yes,
did.
I'm sorry. I stepped past that. So I believe Mr. Townsend is our
I am
current.
I am the current representative to the advisory board, and I'm willing to serve again if the board
I'll make that
sees
motion.
fit.
I'll second.
Further discussion? Being none, those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, again, was Elaine, anything special we need to know about the change of the corporate name of Mamma Mia's?
No, they had applied about maybe 5 years ago to change their corporate name, and the ABCC denied it because they needed a document from them. In the meantime, they had a change of staff, and so now they are moving forward with the name change. So we had just been waiting for the correct documentation on that. and they gave it to us.
Okay.
And it looks like the only change is from Weymouth to Carver.
Yes.
All right, is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second.
Further discussion? Being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. A one-day special license bartending service of New England at the Sportsman's Club on July 27th, noon to 6 p.m.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the one-day special license for bartending services of New England at the Sportsman's Club for
Second.
7/27/19.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion?
I abstain.
No further discussion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it's 4 with 1 abstention. 4 in favor with 1 abstention. We'll have our next meeting on June 18th, then July 2nd, and then August 6th. And then we'll begin our first and third Tuesdays of the month, again, starting in September.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
under the executive session exemption 2 and 3, I move we go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining negotiations with unions, police, and dispatch that may have a detrimental effect on bargaining position of the town if held in open session, and to reconvene in open session for purpose of adjournment.
Second.
All right, need to poll this. Mr. Belbin?
Aye.
Sarah Hewen says aye.
Ron Clark says aye.
Mark Townsend, aye.
Alan Dunham says aye.
All right, that is it. We are done with tonight's meeting. We'll be going to executive session, returning to open session only for the purpose of adjournment.